We have Peoples. Hello, Peoples. It is the Gazimoff. How are we doing?
Not too bad, all things considered. I've lost the ability to speak, obviously.
That could be a problem on a vocally orientated show.
Exactly. It's like trying to write an article and having none of my fingers working. I'm actually feeling quite nice. I've had some currywurst. I've had some fantastic Weiss beer. So yes, things are good.
I'm going to be most jealous of your currywurst, but we are not here to talk about the delicacies of Hamburg or you and miscommunications in time, but I'm sure we'll get to that momentarily. Good to see so many people here. I hope everyone is ready to enjoy, but before we kick off, we're going to start, as always, with it's time for the news.
Okay, so the biggest piece of news out there at the moment is that open beta has begun. Now, we were always told that there would be a bit of open beta before they launched the full game on the 3rd of June, but we weren't quite sure when it was going to start and how much open beta we were going to get. That's now been answered. Open beta started on the 8th of May, and it will run through to the 18th, so that's 10 whole days for you to gorge on Nexus. The other interesting thing is they've opened up the European servers, so if you want to play on a server that's a bit closer to you, if like me you've been spending the past few weeks and months in beta on a US server, then you can log on to one of the new European servers and enjoy fantastically low lag. Brilliant. The third thing that's been happening at the moment is name reservations are finally underway. So if you are looking to register your character, try and get that name in early before the gates open on launch day, then you'll be able to do that from the 13th of May for everyone who's pre-ordered. And that's both name reservations for your favorite character name and guild reservations as well. Unfortunately, it's only one reservation per account, so you won't be able to register every single character you would like to play. But if you've got a particular favorite or main in mind, then you can go and grab that name in advance. So that's really useful to know.
All good stuff indeed. But you said before the rush. How many people do we think are going to be trying to reserve names? I'm sure there's a fair few people to pre-ordered. There's still going to be a rush. If you want to be Bob, your chances are pretty low at actually getting Bob, surely.
I would agree with that. I think that your chances are fairly small. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Carbine have just, based on that information, gone and reserved Bob ahead of time.
Indeed.
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Now, I'm just trying to see if I can work any magic with your volume. I'm a little limited because we have not quite our normal setup tonight. Let me see what I can do.
Am I a bit quiet for people?
You're too quiet, I'm afraid. I need to turn you up. There we go.
Move the microphone there. Is that better for people? Am I nice and loud? And does it help if I put on my Stephen Fry voice and enunciate?
It may well do. We shall see. So, okay, I am called Flibbity Flabbity. I want to get my name. What do I need to do?
Okay, so everyone who's pre-ordered has been sent an email with instructions on what to do and how to do it. Basically, you'll be sent a link to a website for you to log on to and then type in the name and the guild that you'd like to reserve. Nice and simple, really. But the crux is you need to pre-order. So if you haven't decided whether you're going to push the button or not, then go and get it done so you can get your name reserved. If you leave it, if you know you're going to play WildStar and you haven't pre-ordered, then it's only you that's got to blame when someone else has gone and nabbed the name before you.
Indeed.
So
and
don't shoot yourself in the foot.
Unless you're a chewer. Chewers are, of course, allowed to shoot themselves in the foot or any other bodily part. It's quite acceptable. But there's plenty of good reasons for pre-ordering if you haven't. A lot of people I've spoken to have been really quite surprised by open beta. There's those of us that have tracked this game incessantly, and there's those that have just gone, oh, there's an MMO, it's coming up around the corner. Oh, look, open beta, I'll jump in and play it. And gone, actually, this is a bit good. I wasn't expecting that. And that seems to be quite a trend. So I'm quite optimistic as to what they're actually going to get in terms of pre-orders, numbers, and everything else at this point. You know, the ball is in their court. They can get it very wrong still, but they haven't given us any clear signs they're likely to do that yet, I'm pleased to say. But if you think you're going to play the game, get that pre-order in. So the exact date for the name reservations opening is what precisely?
May the 13th. So that's halfway through that beta window.
So you still have a
So you've
small
got a
chance
chance
to play and make your mind up.
Yeah, I would go if you've not played yet and you're still on the fence about it. I would go to WildStar's website, download the beta now, get playing, check it out, and if you like it, shove the pre-order in. There are so many things that you get with the pre-order. It makes sense to do that. As long as you're happy with what you're getting into, I would say it makes sense because you get things like the Rocket House, things like all the other bits and pieces. There was a list, but the big one for me is the Rocket House and all the other bits and pieces that come with it. Not so much the Digital Deluxe Edition. I mean, I have personally gone for that because I want to get the Elden-themed hoverboard, the Elden-themed costume, the Elden-themed dice, and the Elden-themed family pack of... Yeah, you get the idea. So I went for the Digital Deluxe as well. But if you just want to get the Rocket House, or the House Rocket thing, then I would definitely put a pre-order in for it.
Yeah, I mean, I have gone and looked for the physical European Steelbox edition. So I have one of those winging its way over here, largely so it can sit on the wall behind me. And we'll see what happens with that. Now, for me, the biggest change that I've seen, or a quick run around earlier, I've not had too much time to do stuff, is all of a sudden, I don't have 300 and something milliseconds of latency. Which is really rather good in this game. Now,
yeah.
I don't yet know what latency I do have. It doesn't feel like much, but there's currently a little bit of a bugette in that it's currently showing 1 ms. And I refuse to believe that I have 1 ms. I am not plugged in directly to WildStar's data center, despite other rumours to that effect. Robot says, is the Rocket House only if you get the Deluxe Edition? I believe it's...
I actually have the page.
All pre-orders.
I've got the page up here. If you pre-order... regardless of edition, if you pre-order, you get the Rocket House, 3-day head start, exclusive housing trophy, in-game storage bag, pre-order title, name reservation, and apparently they're going to be chucking more stuff in as well. There is also the boom boxes as well. So these are boxes that might contain random additional bonuses, things like dice, things like armor, things like weapons, things like housing plugs, things like costume possibly, maybe even mounts. And every day that you log into beta, whether it was one of the weekend betas or the open beta, you get 3 more boom boxes. So that's 3 more chances at something nice and shiny that you'll have when the game goes live.
Now that does make me consider one thing. Okay, you're getting 3 boxes for logging in. It sounds like a lot, but it really depends on what's in the boxes, what the ratio of drops is like. I mean, there's things they've highlighted, like the Eldan glowing Equivar mount, and I think the War Pig with the crazy eyes was the other one. You know, the mounts people are gonna want, but if they're giving 10 days of beta, everyone's gonna pick up or potentially pick up 30 boxes. Plus other weekends. So people could be picking up, I don't know, let's pick a number, 45, 50 boxes in some cases, for those that have been in other betas and are quite dedicated at it.
Yeah.
That's got to mean the distribution rate on some of those mounts has got to be pretty low to make it remain meaningful.
Potentially, yes. But the way I look at it is this. Would you like free stuff, or would you not like free stuff? That's quite a simple decision to make, isn't it?
It is. I do wonder how many people, though, are going to log in to get the boxes to get an X and instead get 73 Ys. But we don't know what else is in them. And it's going to be interesting as well to see what they keep doing with them, because I think they made a post somewhere saying they'll bring out boom boxes again for like holiday events and other stuff in the future. We don't know
Yeah.
precisely what they're going to do. I hope and pray we never get a boom boxes dropping in the open world and boom keys dropping somewhere else at a different ratio. I would get very upset if that ever happens. But there's been
I
no
don't.
evidence of that yet.
Yeah, I do not think this is going to be a whole Black Lion chest thing all
No.
over again.
Oh, they still make my skin crawl. So Coolman499 says, what is Elden? I suppose that really should be, what are, or possibly, who are the Elden? Do you want to give people a quick outline, Gazzy?
So, the Elden are a mysterious race. No one's quite sure what they look at. And they
Or what they look
have a
like. I mean,
planet.
they probably look at artwork and, things like that.
Trying to be funny again, Mizpah.
Sometimes.
So the Elden are this kind of mysterious, highly advanced, very, very technologically advanced race. And Nexus was their homeworld. So what's the big deal? Well, we've arrived at Nexus with WildStar, and there are no Elden. There are traces of them. There are various Elden labs kicking around. There's some Elden machinery. There's the results of Elden experimentation. And they've even left behind audio logs and recordings describing what they're doing and why they're doing it. But as to where the Elden actually are, nobody knows. So that's part of the big mystery that starts off when you start playing WildStar. Everyone knows about the Elden. There's some kind of big galactic mystery. But
It's probably
where
worth
they've
pointing out as well that for those that don't know the lore, the Elden are kind of highly integrated into the backstory, particularly with the Cassians. There's been many interactions in history, and I won't spoil things for people that don't want to know the story, that don't yet know it. But both factions have got real reasons for wanting to work out what on earth is going on here.
Yeah, and if there's even no reason in terms of the factions trying to work out what's going on for their own history and for their own knowledge, the place is riddled with technology that's even more advanced than that's already possessed.
Mm-hmm.
So that in itself is attracting every kind of pirate, every kind of merchant, every kind of scavenger, every single opportunist in the galaxy is saying, hey, there's a barely guarded planet, literally littered with highly advanced technology. Let's go and see what we can steal. So,
or sell, in the case of Protostar.
Oh, sell in the case of Protostar. So someone was asking, what does the Elden, what does the digital deluxe edition or any deluxe edition come with? You get the Elden hoverboard, the Elden augmentation costume, an Elden title, and Elden dies. Now, Elden themes are very much white, gold, green particularly. So you've got things like green circuitry, green glowing circuitry, green piping, green backlights and screens, and black. So expect a lot of that kind of colour theme throughout the...
And white and black are typically premium colours on dyes in Guild Wars, in other games, FF. Everyone goes for like those, I want to be the ninja, or I want to be the white whatever.
Yeah. So if you've seen, say, the WildStar flick on Adventures, the caretaker is an Elden-created AI, and that's the whole environment around him, where you've got the green glowing pipework and stuff. That's all Elden devices that are being pulled together to power the caretaker. So that should give you an idea of the kind of flavour of stuff. But I think there's also videos out there that show at least the hoverboard out for you to look at if you're interested.
Okay, so open beta's out there. Some people know the game, some people don't. People are diving in. There's not that far to actually go to launch. Let's say you're considering playing the game. What should you be trying to do in beta? I mean, obviously these characters are all going to go away again. This is not a get in early, get your character up to level X and carry on. I don't call those betas, I call that launch. What are people doing in the beta? What are people trying to achieve? And this is both to the channel and Gazzy, you've got so many days of beta. What left? What do you want to try and do with it?
Okay, so in open beta, it's basically the last chance for people to submit bug fixes and to get the last few changes in the pipe. Now, we know that they're not going to be able to capture every single bug and that some will creep into life, but this is their last chance to capture bugs, test bugs, and really get a large number of people hitting the servers. It's also a chance for them to test the production hardware, so the hardware that they're going to be using for live. But apart from that, this is kind of it. This is almost live as far as the game is concerned. All of the closed betas have been about doing testing, doing checking, doing verification on is the game working? Do they need to iterate on something? Do they need to change the design of something? At this particular point, everything's pretty much locked down, and they're mainly checking for performance and bug fixes. As a player, open beta is a chance for you to make that decision. Is WildStar a game you want to buy? Now, there was a really interesting article on MMORPG.com, funny that, site that I write for, by Bill Murphy, who was saying basically what score should WildStar get in terms of Metacritic scores? Where do people think it's going to pan out? And that's basically asking people to make a judgment call. And the key thing is to get in and play it. Even if you've played closed beta at some point in the past. Now, closed beta has been running for nearly a year, and it had about a 3-month break in the middle. So if you played closed beta way back when the dinosaurs roamed the Earth...
It's not the same game anymore.
It's not the same game anymore, and you should really grab a key, log in, play it, see what you think about it. And you might decide, well, hey, this has improved a heck of a lot. I want to actually pre-order it. But by the same token, you might decide, well, I can see where WildStar's going, but it's not the game for me. I'll play something else. In which case, fair enough. But at least you've tried the final product. You wouldn't read a script for a film or something and say, "Oh, this film looks crap. I'm not going to go and watch it at the cinema." When it might be a masterpiece, but you've just read the script.
Okay. Now, Robot8Me says open beta level cap of 30 now. That's gone up from 17, and that's, I believe, is for those that haven't pre-ordered.
No, that
is everyone.
Pre-orders as well.
Okay.
That is everyone apart from those people who were in closed beta who got above level 32, I think it was, who still don't have the level cap applied. But for everyone else, no, you've got a level cap of 30.
Okay, fair enough.
But you
go for it. I was just going to say, Draco, talking about hoverboards. Yep, they're the same hoverboard, I believe, in terms of mechanics, is my understanding, but visually they're going to be different, the Elden and the normal one.
Yeah.
And for those people who have gone, oh, hoverboard level 12 or 15 or whatever it was, it is going to be 25 to get hold of that in live, I believe. That was simply done in closed beta to allow people to get moving around a little quicker and to see where things are at. Now,
and to show hoverboards as well, because
indeed, because they're awesome. Now, quicker and slower is the other debate here. A lot of conversations I've seen talking about 3 things that I guess are intertwined, particularly relevant for those that are maybe stepping out of a much older version of closed beta, or those that haven't really run into the game yet. And that is going to be difficulty level, leveling pace, and balance. And they kind of segue into each other. Now, I've had people tell me, oh, it's an MMO, I'll be maximum level in 48 hours, 72 hours, because that's what you do in an MMO. Yes? When do you think we'll see the first max levels?
2 minutes after they switch the servers on.
The ones that don't have CLB in front of their name.
You didn't say that. I think it will take about... It depends. It depends entirely on a number of factors. If they have booked time off work, if they have cleared their schedule completely, if they have switched their phone to silent or switched it off completely, if they have stocked up their fridge and freezer with an array of snacks and fine beverages, if they have put their sleep pattern on hold, then I would suggest they could probably do it in about 5 days. If, however, they have done none of these things, then I think you're probably going to look playing in evenings, in your own time, casually, loosely, it'll probably take about a month to hit 50.
Okay, that does seem reasonable. It's worth pointing out the leveling pace is closer, say, to vanilla WoW than to a current iteration of WoW. Um, don't expect just to turn up, twiddle a few buttons, be at maximum level. The game just doesn't work that way, and that for me is a very good thing. And that segues us into the next bit, which of course is the difficulty level. Now, a few people are getting surprised, and I think there's going to be many more surprised people in open. The game is, put simply, it has a higher base difficulty level than any other MMO I have played recently, other than perhaps Eve, but it's a different sort of difficulty.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
So basically, there are two levels that you want to look at. One is, as you say, base difficulty, and one is skill cap. Okay? So what level of skill do you need to play the game, to actually be competent in the game? And what level of skill do you need, or can you possibly attain if you get very, very good at it? Yeah? Warcraft is about that fat, give or take. WoW is not a high difference between base level and skill cap, I would argue. There are a lot of things that you can look at in terms of movement and so on, and there are a lot of things you can look at in terms of PvP tactics and so on, but we're not talking a huge amount because there's only so much you can do. And this is coming from someone who did a shed load of raiding in WoW.
It's worth pointing out that a lot of people don't reach the maximum of their skill cap. It's still a curve. It's a tail that gets thinner and thinner.
Yeah. WildStar's skill boundaries are subtly different. So first of all, you need more skill to be able to play the game at a basic level, which should be fairly easy to obtain, but you need to be a bit persistent because of the whole active combat thing. And that catches a lot of people off guard. They expect to be able to just plow through stuff willy-nilly. No, the game is training you to play better. You should listen to the lessons it's trying to teach you. The more important thing, however, is that the skill cap as a result is much higher because you've got active combat, you've got a limited action set. It means the margin for skill, both in terms of your ability to pull off moves and aim spells and stuff like that, is higher, and also because you need to be able to think about how you're building your action set, how you're equipping your gear, what bonuses you're applying to your gear, how you're using abilities at particular times to get the maximum benefit out of them, bearing in mind you can't just sit there and do a standard rotation because, hey, you can move while casting for a lot of stuff. And
you can stand there and do a standard rotation, but you will find you're pretty dead pretty quickly.
Indeed, indeed. There's nothing better to find than a standing target. So there are two elements at play there, and there's both the base skill level and the skill cap have been raised, and that is a very, very good thing for the evolution of the MMO genre, because for far too long we've been sat here at this kind of hotkey-based combat, rotation-oriented focus, which is, after doing it for 14 years, give or take, it's boring, it's done, it's time to move on.
I think that's a touch strong, but I know where you're coming from. But what about those people then that come into the genre without that 14 years of background experience? How high is the hurdle going to be for someone that says, oh, what's an MMO? Let's have a go at this.
I think it depends entirely on the genre that you're used to. I think first-person shooter players and MOBA players are going to dive into this and think, hey, we're right at home. MOBA players in particular, I would suggest you dive in, level up to level 6, get into the PvP battlegrounds, and just have a blast, because you will do. I think that for first-person shooter players, your high reaction times are going to be a huge boon to you in this game, particularly in the slightly more competitive areas. But I would also say that if people want to kind of down-tune the difficulty a touch, you can play an MMO the way you're supposed to play them, and that's with other people. So get a leveling buddy, get someone that you know who's also interested in the game, try and sync your game times together and play together. Because, well, hey, the whole game is designed for people to play together, so you might as well take advantage of that. It's not particularly using it as a bit of a crutch because you're abilities and your skills should be synergistic somewhat, but it does mean that you don't get any kind of bumps in the road where something's particularly difficult and you think, oh crap, I can't do this.
Well,
You can kind of smooth that off.
I may have to interject there, because one thing they're doing really nicely in this game that I've been missing elsewhere is there's plenty of stuff that is actually designed for groups. It's not a case of you can solo it anyway if you feel like, if you've got the top end of that skill cap. Okay, you can with some of it, but with some of it, you still can't. Doesn't matter who you are, what class you are, or what you're doing. Some of the bounty missions that are designed for like 3, 4, 5 players at higher levels. Some of the there was something else that sprung to mind that jumped out, but I can't think of it now. But there are some things there that you need a group for. There are some things in the open world that are going to flatten you, and we haven't seen that for a long time.
Indeed. I mean, there are things like I thought you were going to ramble on for a bit, so I was going to try and take a swig of beer. In fact, I will do anyway. Cheers, everyone.
We should probably synchronise that activity.
Yes. It's very good beer. So, in terms of group activities, yes, you have bounty missions, which are 3, 4, which can be anything from 2 to 5 players. And yes, you will find people in local chat saying, does anyone want to group up to help take down this mob? And that's always worth diving into, because you make new friends and connections that way. But there are also things like ship hand missions, which are kind of flexible, scalable group content, takes about 15, maybe 30 minutes, and they will scale automatically from 2 to 5 players. In fact, I think you might even be able to do those solo. There are other bits.
I'm not sure you're supposed to, but I have done some of them solo.
Exactly, but and it's little things like that. But it's also like there are certain points in the game where, depending on the class and the spec that you've chosen, can be a bit difficult, particularly once you get past the early level stuff and you're either trying to do the level 10 plus content or stuff like that, and just having someone else around makes things so much smoother. Again, you don't need to have that, because playing by yourself helps to train you for later content, dungeons, all those kind of bits and pieces. But having someone else along can remove the kinks an awful lot.
Okay, so we're here in this open beta. We're running around in this big old world. There's a few people, again, that aren't going to know what's out there. So what sort of things are actually out there for people to dig into? And for those that have got the reference point to other MMOs, where are the big differences?
So I would say the active combat system is the starting point, and that's the biggest, most obvious difference that people will pick up on, particularly if you come from a Warcraft, Age of Conan, Rift, Star Wars: The Old Republic. If you come from any of those games, this will feel different to you, and you might find it refreshing, you might find it discomforting.
Strange things just happen to the camera. Bear with me. You're creeping into my space. You're not supposed to do that. There we go. Fixed.
Okay. So that's the first thing I would say. I've just noticed it's getting dark around me as well. The second thing I would say is a lot of people expect quest text up front. Big stories say, blah, 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 blah. This is terrible news. The orcs have just burned down my entire farm, and I have nothing but this cookie to help me. Please, I will give you this cookie if you just go and kill 50,000 orcs, cause a minor diplomatic incident, and rescue my cow Bessie.
Is it a good cookie?
Yeah. It's got to be a good... It would be chocolate chip if you want me to do that quest, I'd say. That's your standard way of delivering a quest. WildStar does things slightly differently. It uses very much shorter quest text to basically say, if you don't really care and you just want to go out and get the job done, then you'd go up to an NPC and the NPC would say, go and kill 50,000 orcs for me, please. Come back when you're done. And then you say, but why? And it will say, oh, they just burnt down this farm. You see this farm that's on fire behind me? Yes, they did it. Or why did they do that? Because, and you get this whole dialogue thing going, and you find out a bit more about the game lore. If you're in a rush to get to level cap, then you would miss out on all that. You just go click, click, accept, done. If you want to find a bit more about what's going on in the world, you say, oh, tell me more. What's going on here? Yeah. But because it doesn't throw it to you up front, people say, "Oh, this quest was boring." Yeah, well, actually, read the stuff if you want to know more. It's like that whole Starship Troopers thing. Would you like to know more?
And talking about lore, I'll just jump in again as you've given me a nice intro here. They've made some really smart decisions that they elaborated on in packs about how they're delivering the story of the game. And I'll come back to chat with some comments as well in a moment, not ignoring you guys. But so here's the situation in a typical MMO. I am interested in the story, and the story arc takes me to this big cavern where the orc leader is, and I assemble 25 of my erstwhile colleagues, and we go in there to smack the orc leader around the head, because it takes a group, it's a raid. Great. And I get in there, and finally I'm in the cavern of utter thingamy-bob, and I go, so what's going on in here then? Oh look, here's a book that's going to tell me all about it. Hang on, Raid Force, just wait there while I read this 17-page book. Doesn't always work very well, because most other people just want to go and slap the orcs. Or the chewers, in my case. But here what they've done is they've taken the story content out of those arcs. They've made them entertaining and engaging in their own right. But they've actually created a... how shall I refer to this? They've created a series of events that you can choose to participate or not with a particular NPC that will be dedicated over the weeks and months to follow to help you evolve the story from the things you learn leveling, which gives you a load of questions, to then start answering those questions as time goes on. And I thought that was actually very, very clever. It means I can still raid, I can still be competitive, I can still run around and slap chewers, but when I'm in the mood to go and learn more of the story, I go and do something specific to find that out.
Indeed. So that was one of the, and it was never a bugbear to me because I was raiding, so I got to see all the story. But it was a lot of issues in World of Warcraft. I mean, the death of the Lich King, the capture of Garrosh, and his subsequent being carted off to trial. Blizzard have a tendency to put the biggest elements of their storyline in raid dungeons, which causes a problem for them because they also want everyone to be able to experience the story as well. So then they start doing things like looking for raids and so on and so forth to make them ultra accessible to people. That's one way of doing it. I'm not going to say it's the right way or the wrong way. It's a solution to a problem. WildStar's done things differently. It said people play raids because they are hard, because they are challenging content. So we will make them hard, challenging content. We will have one setting for our raids, and that is hard, so be prepared. However, we won't put the story in the raids. There will be some story, but not the big story. Instead, they will have these Drusera instances, which is a particular NPC who's resident in Nexus. She's a ghostly lady that you'll hear murmurings of from about level 20 onwards. And these instances will be dotted throughout your leveling progression. You don't have to do them. They are entirely optional. But for those people who want that little bit of extra lore, these are the places where you will find it. They will also continue to be delivered post-launch as well. So they will add further Drusera instances in to continue explaining the story and pushing it forward as well. But again, truly optional. So if story takes a backseat to going and killing exiles like it's going out of fashion, maybe you want to have that set of orange-lined slippers that you've been hankering after for ages, then this is the way to do it.
They're not as warm as Chewer.
I don't know. I'm still trying to get that granite stone fireplace built, but there we go. Can you see a bit of rivalry there?
I can see just a touch emerging. But they've also made them slower paced as well. So there is combat, there is stuff to do, but they've made those accessible, but made them rich and veined with story. And we'll be picking up on that because we're actually going to have a certain Monsieur Chad Moore here in the near future. I'm reliably informed. So we'll be picking his brains to see what nuggets we can tease out of him. Now, I'm going to take a moment to drop back to the chat and pick up a few different bits and pieces. Now, Coolman was asking, referring to us saying a turn-based MMO. Do we mean WoW? Well, let's use that as the reference point because, as he quite rightly points out, high-level PvP in that game is still frantic and very fast, and involves a lot of movement, involves a lot of dashing around behind pillars, getting your abilities off at the right time. It's certainly pretty active and dynamic. So, what's the difference between high-level raid content, it's say in WoW, high-level PvP content in WoW, and this more freeform approach?
Okay, so I will confess I am much more of a high-level PvE player than PvP player, and that requires two different skill sets. PvE, you're mainly looking at how much damage you can deal within a particular time frame without dying. Yeah, nice standard thing. And if you can deal lots of damage and not die, then raid leaders love you. Unless you're the healer or the tank, in which case you should probably be healing or tanking. But I do damage. I'm DPS. That's my job. In PvP, you're looking at a number of different variables to try and build a playstyle that works for you, which is basically hit things without being hit. And so you try and say, okay, I want to have a mixture of short cast time or instant abilities. I want to maybe have a couple of longer cast time, hugely damage dealing abilities, and I want to be able to either soak as much damage as possible or brush it off or mitigate against it or heal through it. You get the idea. WildStar's PvP and other games like WoW's PvP, WildStar's first of all is much more designed around moving and casting. WoW's isn't. WoW's is much more designed around pivot casting with a kind of clutch or handful of instant casts built in to kind of get around that. So those are the kind of first things you see. A lot more casting and a lot more movement while casting goes on in WildStar. It's also a lot more fun to watch vision because each spell or ability has a telegraph attached to it. As a spectator, you can see what's going on, and as a combatant, it's much more useful. You can start doing things like juking other players and saying, I'm going to cast something, actually I'm not going to cast something, and then they waste their interrupts or stuns or whatever, which is kind of handy. But also I would say it's much more involved and immersive. WoW's has always felt kind of limited and clunky to me. You know, the fact that you have to stop and then cast and then move again unless you're casting things like Prayer of Mending or stuff like that. You know, instance Flame Blast if you're a mage. It felt like it was a combat system that was never quite happy with itself. WildStars feels a lot more natural.
Okay. So with that one, let's take another question from the chat. And Easter eggs. Well, we've just gone past Easter, but we're being asked, are there a number of sort of Easter eggs and cultural references that people are going to find in WildStar? Do any spring to mind?
Cultural references, you might find a couple of familiar sounding NPCs that are dotted around. Nothing too heavy, I would be honest. There is a Kyrie Dreamstar in Malgrave, I think, which is an NPC you could possibly interact with. And there are a couple of others dotted around, I think, which are...
There is indeed a Gaz the Tricky, I believe.
There is a Gaz the Tricky, who's in Derridu. So, yeah, there are several NPCs dotted around which are kind of nods to certain groups and people and guilds and so on. If you walk around Thade, which is the exile capital, if you look carefully, you will find the Big Cheese, who is a block of cheese with eyes. I'm not sure quite who it's supposed to represent, but I do know that there is a certain guild which has been involved with WildStar for quite some time, which is closely affiliated with cheese and cheese products.
Couldn't possibly say. Let's take a look. We've got more questions coming out. The comments being made that sort of WoW PvP really is about knowing the class, getting the gear, getting the right crafting, and basically going, that was your fault, that was my fault. And basically playing, there's a little bit of pass the parcel with who does stuff and second guessing things. I think we've all seen that. Here it's going to be quite simple. Watch the replay. If you're standing in the red stuff, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, and that's what I was essentially saying to a greater or lesser extent. And Coolman has a much more abridged way of saying it, but effectively, those are the limitations that you get with WoW's combat system. It was fantastic back in 2004 when the game launched because everyone was dealing with 150 millisecond latency out of the bat anyway because broadband wasn't a big thing back then. PC power wasn't where it is now, and you needed to aim for a much broader, wider range of systems, and so the combat system was worked. Things have moved on since then substantially, and I think it's time to try something new. And I've been trying WildStar, and I think it's fantastic.
Okay, let's do one more quick topic, and then we'll probably say this is a wrap because we're all running on no sleep at the moment for various reasons. If you can't tell, there's a lot of guilds coming here from other games. In they land, certain set of expectations, and sometimes those expectations are going to be around things like raiding. How do you think your typical raid guild is going to find life as a raider in this game?
I think that raiding in WildStar is going to be a tough challenge if the dungeons are anything to go by, and the words that are coming out from things like the live streams that we've seen and the PAX demonstration that we've seen. When we've seen other players doing the 20-man raids, some players have been doing the genetic archives, 20-man raids, and streaming it, and Cybak's a good example of that. If you've not seen the 20-man recordings, go watch Cybak's recordings. Fantastic, really informative, and quite detailed as well. The first thing I would say is they're hard. They're supposed to be hard. The second thing, though, is don't expect to just waltz through it. Don't expect things to be nice and easy. Things like mind-numbing trash and stuff like that.
There is no trash.
Carbine said that there is no trash and that their base population is hard and puzzling. As in, it will take a bit of working out to unlock how to kill it, but there's also rewards there as well. Just looking at things like Experiment X82, I think it is,
89.
The kind of leapfroggy one with the platforms that fall out underneath him. The mechanics themselves seem to be slightly more complex than we've seen with games like World of Warcraft. So you're dealing with the environment is trying to kill you, the mob is trying to kill you, and
your own raid is trying to kill you in that particular
fight. Your
fight.
own raid is trying to kill you. Yeah. So there's all those kind of fun bits and pieces. It's like it's got aspects of Baron Geddon, your vanilla Warcraft raiding. It's got all kinds of bits and pieces going off in there. And as a raider, that's really intriguing because you think, well, I've got to do this, got to do that, got to do the other. The other obstacle, and this is a kind of a more fundamental base practices thing, is it's also going to be about healing as well, because currently you can quite easily say as a healer or say as a DPS, where were the heals? And the healer will say, well, you were being an idiot, and there'll be an argument back and forth about who's in the right and who's in the wrong. And usually the DPS will win and the healer will kind of sulk it for it. In WildStar, it's much more easy to say, am I standing in a place where heals are happening, or do I need to go elsewhere to get some heals? Because the green telegraphs on the ground will tell you, okay, there's some healing here, I'll dive into that, or there's some healing there, I'll dive into that, or there's healing here and no one's standing in it. Why? Because the healer's not aiming their heals properly. So you get the idea. You're still going to be able to blame the healers, so as DPS, don't...
You're fine, don't worry.
You're fine, don't worry. But you will have to think a bit more about, first of all, am I standing in the right place to get some heals? Or is the healer standing in the right place to actually throw heals on people, or are they miles away from everyone somewhere having a coffee?
Running away down the corridor screaming.
Running away down the corridor, possibly AFK, might be lagging, Standard excuses. Oh, you didn't do a ready check.
Okay, let's dive into another one. Well, I've got to elaborate on that for a moment, and I think it's going to either make raid guilds or it's going to break raid guilds. And I think more will break than get made, because I think it's naturally hard and a learning curve that people will need to go through. I can think back to Vanilla WoW days, things like we're now learning to fight Valistras. Let us be here on this boss for 3 weeks while we try to get it down for the first time. And that
Valistraz was easy.
it was a nightmare. It was one of our nightmare bosses. Others, fine. That one was our big stumbling point. But every guild had those back in the day in Vanilla. The point in time where you just hit that brick wall and you stopped. And I think we're going to get that again. And I think a lot of people aren't used to this. You know, if you fight the same raid boss 4 nights in a week or 4 nights in 2 weeks, people go, well, you're doing it wrong, you're failing. And the answer here is not necessarily. Sometimes it's just going to take that long. If the difficulty level is where they're saying it's going to be, that's what it was like back in the day. So it'll be a real interesting comparison, and player mindsets are going to have to adapt, those that want to stick at it. And let's be equally fair and say they've also said that 40-man is going to be harder than 20-man. So we've seen some 20-man stuff. We've seen little snippets of 40-man stuff at PAX. I still remember that big spiral telegraph and going, interesting. But people that think 20 is hard, I think are going to get a shock by the time people get to see 40. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. I don't think it's going to be instant. But people's mindsets are going to have to adjust. So if your raid group is kind of cobbled together without some sort of social string to bind it to itself, it's probably going to explode. So I think we're going to see a lot of guilds start up, and I think 4 to 6 weeks in, you're going to see a lot of guild It'll be interesting.
Don't forget as well. God, it's getting really dark in here now. It's like I'm in the middle of a cave or something.
Coming live from the secret lair.
Yes, this is my underground lair. All of the raids will require attunements. So you won't be getting into the genetic archives. And I need to be careful how I say that, because once I wrote it in an article, I called it the generic archives, so I was thinking that's going to stick. So yeah, before you can even set foot in the genetic archives, you're going to need to do an attunement quest. So you hit level cap, you start doing your attunement quest. So people won't be rushing in there. And I believe that the 40-man Datascape raid will also have an attunement quest as well. So just because you've blitzed your way to 50 doesn't mean you'll be raiding, because other people will need to get to 50. They'll need to do the attunement quest as well, and then you can raid. So I think that's going to be part of it. Oh, someone said, don't piss off the people with the res. Well, everyone can res in WildStar, but if it's a raid wipe, then you're going to be saying, oh, well, it's a raid wipe. You'll have to res back at the Hollow Crypt, or whatever it is, rather than waiting around for a res.
It's more of an open world mechanic. Oh, let's have someone pick me up rather than have to get back there. It's probably not going to see too much of it in a raid. I've not seen a live res yet anywhere, unless I'm missing something.
I haven't seen a combat res at all. I don't think there's a combat.
It's an interesting design choice.
It is. Don't get me wrong. It means that combat res people who always get favoured because they have combat res, that won't happen in WildStar. You would say, oh, we'll bring such and such a class because they have the combat res. We'll bring warlocks instead of mages because they have combat res.
That's just because they did more damage than mages at the time, but that's another story.
No. My uber elite skills were dealing more damage than the warlock, but the warlock had combat res.
Yeah, but they did have to go and farm soul shards for a long time, so hey, that makes up for something.
Really?
So we're going to see a lot of server politics, as Rebel Tech News just pointed out. We're going to see a lot of guilds sort of chopping and changing. We're going to have a lot of people have to adopt a pretty different mindset. And that's going to lead me on, I think, to the last thing I'll just throw out there for those that aren't massively familiar, and that is, even up to this point, Carbine's mindset kind of needs to be applauded from a personal perspective. we've seen a lot of games where the devs, the media teams, the CS teams start off being communicative, and as the community gets bigger and bigger and bigger, that becomes harder and harder to achieve and maintain. Now, I'm not saying the whole world has had a conversation with a dev in their back pocket, but the amount of communication that I see and the fact that it's still going strong only says very, very good things. We keep seeing random posts by them, Reddit, forums, live streams,
Yeah.
events everywhere.
On that note, Jeremy Gaffney is doing a Ask Me Anything on Reddit right now. So if you want to open another browser tab and throw a question to the gaffer. The great thing is that Gaffney has a huge amount of industry experience. I mean, the guy founded Turbine back in the day. The company that made Dungeons and Dragons Online and Lord of the Rings Online. He's spent a couple of years working for NCSoft before he picked to work for Carbine. He spent a couple of years with NCSoft, basically doing localizations, not just of Eastern MMOs to the Western market, but also taking Western MMOs eastwards as well. So he really, really knows how the MMO market works.
He's a lot of fun to talk to.
He is a hell of a lot of fun to talk to. So yeah, throw in a question if you haven't already. I'm sure he'll be lurking around still. And he frequents the WildStar Reddit anyway. That's something that you just don't see. The executive producer of
who has freedom to say whatever he feels like.
Yeah. So basically, the top guy at Carbine will go on Reddit and share jokes with the WildStar community. That's pretty awesome.
And I'm sure the PR team that have this schedule of releases must be tearing their hair out from time to time, because he has a habit of revealing stuff.
Yeah.
Now, we're being asked a little bit about the community in the game. Is it a case of people are spamming the chat going bleep, 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 you're a bleep, go back to bleep, or are people actually being nice to each other? You get both. But I've got to say the balance at the moment is more shifted towards people actually trying to build a decent community. Would you agree, disagree with that statement?
Okay, so I think that by and large, people are trying to create a decent community, and people that are being told, people that are less community oriented don't tend to get us on as well. I think that's partly because of the nature of the game. It's much more. This is the thing. So other games, World of Warcraft being one in particular, but also SWTOR as well, have what do we call it? With the mobs, once you tag the mobs. Yes, mob tagging. So when you attack a mob, you tag it, it's yours. When you kill it, it's your loot, even if someone else comes along and kills it with you. WildStar, you start attacking a mob, someone else comes along and attacks the mob as well. The cool thing is, you'll both get loot, you'll both get quest progression, you'll both get all of these things, which means that instantly the game is much less competitive for resources, much more sociable and free-forming for resources. So, particularly for questing. So you don't start hating people for, you tagged that mob that I was going to kill, you absolute swine. That kind of thing. Doesn't happen nearly as much in WildStar because of the way the tagging system works. So it naturally leads to a more cooperative community. That doesn't mean that everyone's nice. There are still PvP servers, and I will probably be rolling on one when the game goes live. But it means that people generally aren't assholes for the sake of being assholes.
Okay, and we'll throw one more thing into the mix where we wrap things up. Because, as I said, sleep is good sometimes. We might need to get some of it soon. Let's talk numbers for a minute. I don't know if the answers are out there, so this might turn into a speculation question, and we'll see if the answers ever emerge in the future. Now, if you saw on the Wednesday show, Talking Everything Blizzard, the quite amazing thing that we've got 1 million pre-orders for Warlords, which I still find impressive, and that number's only going to grow, so it's already beaten other records that are out there. Where do you think we are with pre-orders for WildStar? Is there any information that's been around? I haven't seen it.
Okay, so there are a million pre-orders for Warlords of Draenor because of two things. First of all, they're offering a free boost
Level
to level
90,
90
yep.
for anyone who pre-orders. Secondly, there are an awful lot of people who play World of Warcraft, like World of Warcraft, who've enjoyed World of Warcraft for the last 11 years, and see themselves as continuing playing World of Warcraft. And you know what? Good luck to them. If you found a game you enjoy and that you're still
Keep
enjoying
playing it.
you should play it. Yeah, I've got nothing against those people. With WildStar, I think that we are probably looking at around 250,000 pre-orders, give or take. And I say that for a couple of reasons. It's a brand spanking new IP, so it's not familiar to a lot of people. They haven't really got the marketing push or marketing clout that other games have. You see that partly with MMO special interest games, but you also see that with the more broader general interest gaming websites as well. When you compare,
I'm going to question that there, Simon. Here's a reason why I do. I was very surprised going to PAX quite how much of a central theme WildStar was. Positioning, booth size, everything down to placement in the official show guide, stuff like that. You walked around Boston, WildStar was on top of half the cabs that were driving past. Most of the bins were plastered with WildStar logos. It was great to see. But surprised me how loud the message was and how out there it was, walking around in an environment that's as cluttered with gaming messages as PAX in Boston. Is this just a very good team spending their resources well, or is there maybe a bit more marketing there than we might have thought?
So here's the thing. I'm going to compare it with Elder Scrolls Online. So Elder Scrolls Online very recently had a new, was launched very recently, had big amounts of marketing clout, and pretty much everyone knew that Elder Scrolls was an MMO set in the Elder Scrolls universe and was coming out on X date. Yeah. You ask these same people, have you heard of WildStar? Have you thought about pre-ordering WildStar? Have you tried WildStar? Have you played WildStar? And they go, what's WildStar? That's the acid test to me.
Okay.
It's not how effective is their marketing at PAX, because PAX is only 50,000, 60,000 people? I mean, how many people went through Gamescom last year? That was 320,000 people, I think it was, give or take. As a subset of the entire international gaming community, that's not a huge number of people, yeah? So I would say that your PAX presence helps a lot with people who are there, helps a lot with the media that are there. You need something with a bit of a wider gun.
Do you think they'll still majorly promote what they've done post-launch at Gamescom?
I would like to think they'll be at Gamescom. I don't think it's a certainty. I mean, Guild Wars, ArenaNet were at Gamescom with Guild Wars 2 doing a kind of post-launch, thanks to the fans, have a meal on us kind of thing, and they did a nice little calm, tranquil. In fact, their whole stand at Gamescom was this little oasis of calm. And because they just launched, they were giving away promo codes for a dragon logo in-game T-shirt, which was kind of a cool thing to do. I'd like to think that that Carbine might do a similar thing with WildStar, but I'm not counting on it. And the main reason is that they've got this 1 month cadence that they're looking at doing a new release every month. That's a lot of hard work, and pulling devs out to do a show is still a big ask, even though with not having to do a demo, with just setting up the systems and with just setting up something and bringing some people in for interviews and so on, it's a different thing. But I still think I wouldn't count on it. It'd be nice, but I'm not going to guarantee it.
Okay. Well, I think the time has ticked, the clock has run its course. We've had a nice little exploration of the stuff that's out there. I'm quite sure that the next time we're back, it might be we have an interesting guest. It might be we have some new stuff to share. And we should be back with the full team. So, to those of you that have tuned in, listened in, contributed, thrown questions at us, and danced on your heads while we're standing here, or sitting here even, thank you very much. It's been appreciated. This has been probably the world's shortest Cosmotronic. Dead on the hour, start to finish. Say goodbye, Gazimoff.
Goodbye. This is long distance Gazimoff calling from Hamburg.
Go.
Longest distance Cosmotronic.
Indeed. Well, I don't know. I did one come from the States. We'll have to see. Yes. We'll see. What we need is one where we're all in different continents at the same time. Now, that'll be the one to pull off. I'm sure it's going to happen one of these days.
Yeah, probably.
So there you go. Go enjoy your currywurst and your Weiss beer. To those of you in the channel, thank you kindly. And, well, this as usual is Mizpah signing off from MMOBuff. Thank you, folks.